still a lot of mysteries around a lot of things that happened in this country.
In the night, up came a person who was wearing a cloak, and he had in his hands the Great Seal of the United States. Jefferson, of course, looked at it and said, "This is it."
It's a very dangerous thing to reveal the truth, but we have to.
Let's go back to really important individuals here. His name is Nicholas Roerich.
The truncated pyramid with the all-seeing eye on the top. Nicholas Roerich is the person who is responsible for that ending up on the dollar bill.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the President of the United States, and Henry Wallace was the Secretary of Agriculture. Now, Henry Wallace was deeply involved in the occult.
Roerich to Wallace to FDR to the dollar bill.
I was initiated into this very ancient order.
Here we are at the Nicholas Roerich Museum.
Do you really think it has anything to do with the Illuminati?
The owl is the totem symbol of the Illuminati.
Yes, because Roerich was the Illuminati.
They all seem to have been Masons.
His son was murdered.
Those who normally get out, they're killed. Hexagrams are used during occult ceremonies when you're summoning up demons.
Because we're dealing with Lucifer.
And the all-seeing eye of God is one of the emblems that the Freemasons use.
He said, "You're trying to say that Masonry is evil." I said, "It comes right out of the same pit of hell." Didn't win a lot of friends that day.
Our history of the dollar bill is a strange telling, one that involves an American president, a former vice president, a mysterious Russian mystic, and a determined Jewish researcher on the trail of an ancient artifact that is said to have been in the possession of the most powerful rulers in history, and somehow directly influenced the design of the dollar bill. As incredible as it seems, it's believed this mysterious object could mark the beginning of Armageddon.
There's going to be a bloodbath there.
With them is an expert in the signs and symbols of the occult world.
This is not the eagle.
Who claims that the details of the dollar bill are no accident, but represent the diabolical working of secret societies.
This is the eye of a phoenix, looking on in favor of the secrets of the dollar bill.
Most debates about the design of the dollar bill usually involve the founding fathers of America, but it's important to remember that they only designed a Great Seal. There are many details to the dollar bill that go far beyond the seal itself. The Great Seal was developed through 3 committees, involving a total of 14 men. But in the end, the work was submitted in June of 1782 by essentially one man, Charles Thomson. What is little known is that while Thomson presented a preliminary sketch, his final design was submitted to Congress only in the form of a written description. Looking at the rough drawings Thomson put together with artist William Barton, it becomes clear that many of the specific details of the seal, as we know it today, were added later on. For example, above the head of the American eagle are 13 stars that form a 6-pointed hexagram. While Thomson's description called for the 13 stars, their hexagram formation was not part of his original description and is not present in the earliest realizations of the design. The hexagram seems to have been added in the 20th century. The nature of the Great Seal is so mysterious that some believe that it came from a supernatural force. An account recorded by Dr. Robert Hieronymus in his book, Founding Fathers, Secret Societies, says that the Great Seal was given to Thomas Jefferson by a mysterious cloaked figure.
I love that story. The Founding Fathers were trying to get the Great Seal of the United States designed. They needed to have a design for the Great Seal to represent our nation. And Jefferson went outside in the night, and up came a person, an individual, who was wearing a cloak whom he couldn't totally see, and he had in his hands the Great Seal of the United States. And he basically said, or this being said, you know, you're struggling over the symbol for our nation? Here it is.
The account reads that Jefferson told a strange story. A man approached him wearing a black cloak that practically covered him, face and all, and told him that he, the strange visitor, knew they were trying to devise a seal, and that he had a design which was appropriate and meaningful.
Jefferson, of course, looked at it, according to this story, and said, this is it. This is it. He knew it was it, and it was right. So he supposedly came running back into whatever, whether it was a tent or whatever it was, and he showed it to other individuals, and he told them about, he met this person outside. Of course, they went outside to go to find the guy, and he's gone. So supposedly we'll never find out who designed the Great Seal of the United States.
While Dr. Hieronymus admits that he is skeptical about such stories, there are others who claim to believe them to this day. Perhaps it has something to do with John Adams, who was on the first seal committee with Thomas Jefferson. According to the written account, John Adams was there when this bizarre event took place. Oddly enough, the Adams Memorial in Washington, D.C. is adorned with this mysterious cloaked figure. Perhaps it's just a coincidence. The first historical account of the Great Seal's design was written by a 19th century American Army officer named Charles A.L. Totten. In his book on the secret symbols of the dollar bill, Masonic author David Oveson writes that Totten equated the birth of the United States with the beginnings of what he called the New Atlantis, a title given to a work by Sir Francis Bacon, one of the mysterious financial backers of the Virginia colony. Oveson goes on to write that the Great Seal and the dollar bill represent the most extraordinary example in history of the public evolution of a magical design. Even as Sir Francis Bacon and his contemporary, Dr. John Dee, were said to be in contact with the spirit realm, there are those who believe that it is this dimension that has been guiding the course of America and the so-called evolution of the dollar bill. Debates have gone on for years about the secret symbolism of the Great Seal of the United States, whether or not these symbols represent secret societies, or if they are what the White House and the U.S. Congress currently tell us, symbols of divine providence, of stability, and the patriotism of America. What the Founding Fathers intended as they designed and ultimately approved of the Great Seal remains mostly a mystery.
There's still a lot of mysteries around a lot of things that happened in this country. It's not in our history books.
There can be no doubt that those things hidden in the shadows of the last 2 centuries are not easily brought to light. But when one comes into the modern era, into the age of photography, film, and the advanced practices of mass media, it becomes a bit easier to document world events and the intentions of those who have helped to shape them. In the late 19th century, Harvard professor Charles Eliot Norton referred to the Great Seal as a dull emblem of the Masonic fraternity. This idea was furthered by occult philosopher Manly P. Hall in the early part of the 20th century. Hall not only believed that the Great Seal was Masonic, but that it was created through the collective consciousness of the occult societies and represented the secret destiny that they had in mind for America.
I'd say that he saw the secret destiny of America as the beginning of a world democracy, and that this was a kind of an experiment in democracy that had been envisioned for thousands of years before. So he saw this much like Francis Bacon envisioned what he called the New Atlantis.
In 1926, Hall began publishing a newspaper called The All-Seeing Eye, dedicated to his occult views of philosophy. It was during Hall's era that the all-seeing eye of the Great Seal would be taken out of obscurity and placed on the back of the dollar bill by President Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1935. This might all be seen as just a coincidence, if not for the fact that FDR seemed to be familiar with Hall's teachings on the occult. Today, Hall's legacy is carried on at the Philosophical Research Society in Los Angeles, California, a society that Hall founded in 1934, just 1 year before the Great Seal found its way onto the back of the dollar bill. The current president of Hall Society is Dr. Obadiah Harris, shown here in what is called the Wisdom Library at PRS. According to their website, the library is made up of writings that deal with divination, tarot cards, Kabbalah, alchemy, astrology, metaphysics, Buddhism, theosophy, and secret societies.
And wisdom literature is about relationships not only to each other, but to nature, to the universe. That's what this library is. This library is a library about the wisdom that is in nature and in relationships, and how it is that you can tap into that wisdom in any culture. It all overlaps. And Mr. Hall felt like that was really the future for the human race.
Like Hall, Dr. Harris believes in the destiny of America. Even more interesting is that Dr. Harris's own writing on the subject was unofficially acknowledged by an important figure in FDR's White House.
I wrote a little book one time. One of my first books I wrote was The Reawakening of the Americas. So we usually lose sight of the fact that a whole continent. And I got a little 1-cent postcard from Eleanor Roosevelt thanking me for that. I carried that around for years because I thought that was a great compliment.
But even more important was the familiarity that President Franklin Roosevelt had with the arcane literature in Manly Hall's so-called Wisdom Library, a collection of occult books that Hall had gathered from all over the world.
And Mr. Roosevelt himself, you know, back in 1942, after the Pearl Harbor invasion, sent some of his people here to microfiche the works in this library because he looked upon it as a national treasure. He wanted to preserve it. And I was surprised that when I first heard that, just how much he seemed to know about such a treasure of wisdom that is contained here.
FDR's interest in the arcane and mystical was further reflected in the relationship he had with his Secretary of Agriculture, Henry Asgard Wallace.
And so it was then in 1935 when Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the President of the United States, and Henry Wallace was the Secretary of Agriculture. Now, Henry Wallace was deeply involved in the occult.
Wallace's interest in mysticism was well known in circles around Washington, D.C., but it was something that would eventually damage his career in America.